I think that the Biden administration did more harm to the economy than good. And I think what the Trump administration is doing right now is there's going to be pain either way because we are in such a bad deficit and people are struggling really hard.
Most of the things Trump is doing are hurting. Obviously, I think the tariffs are quite bad, and they have hurt our economy. And I think they also have contributed to the labor market that we're seeing now because of all the uncertainty and because of the taxes they place on intermediate goods. And with regard to the deficit, I don't know which deficit you're talking about, if you're talking about the trade deficit or budget deficit, but Trump clearly does not care about the budget deficit because he just passed a lot of tax cuts.
And the biggest tax cuts for the working class. Yeah, I think that it's important to pay for food stamps.
So how's that not the same thing as like the USAID thing? You're forcing me, regardless of my opinion, to pay for this welfare.
It's in our home. It's like if we had a neighborhood of people and I knew my neighbor was hungry and I had food, I'm gonna help my neighbor.
Liking and subscribing helps me continue to produce content and it's greatly appreciated. You can also make sure to catch these debates live, either here on YouTube or in the description. There are links to my Twitch, my Kick, and my Twitter. So I saw you on Jubilee, and what I saw you say there, the things like I took the most issue with there were about the sort of the DOGE and USAID stuff, because that's what you went to talk about. I suppose I do kind of want to ask though, like, did you see the fact check on the sort of dollars printed under the different presidents?
Yes, they change their fact checks every now and then. So I watched it when it came out, but then I watched it again and there was a couple added in there and some changed. So you can let me know and then we can talk about it. But to my understanding, under the Biden administration, 40% of the dollars circulating were printed under him.
Right. So one, that is not true, just as a matter of the percent of like money that was printed. It's not true that 40% of dollars were printed under Biden. Most of the money that was printed under Trump. But secondly, presidents aren't directly responsible for the money supply. That is something that is up to the Federal Reserve, and the president doesn't really have any direct say in it. At least they're not supposed to. Trump is sort of trying to get more of a say in it, which I think is bad, but that is something up to the Federal Reserve. And the reason you see there's different types of money, and we define money differently. So you see a big spike in the M1 money supply, which is like base money. You do see a big spike in that in 2020, but one, that was under Trump, and two, it was only because they changed the definition. If you look at a broader definition of money, which is M2, which includes everything in M1 plus some other stuff, that grew, or like 9% of total dollars were printed of the M2 money supply from January 2021 to January 2025 when Biden was in office.
Okay, so yeah, I'm reading right now between early 2020 and early 2022. So it's in between both administrations, but yeah, the president doesn't actually have say in how much and why it's printed. It's the Federal Reserve. I understand that.
Sure. So I don't think it's fair to blame. I don't think it's fair to blame Biden for those dollars being printed, and I think that's obviously.
I don't blame Biden totally for much, because I think he was more of an asleep at the wheel kind of a president. I blame when I term presidents, I'm terming the entire administration. So
okay, well, it's not even necessarily his administration either, because again, the Federal Reserve is sort of supposed to operate independently. The president does get to pick. Does get to appoint the head, and the Senate will confirm it. But day to day, it operates independently. And the president, it's very unusual for the president to do, for example, what Trump does, where he will literally call Jerome Powell. He will do sort of weird press conferences at the renovation of the Federal Reserve with Jerome Powell and ask him to lower interest rates. That is very, very unusual and tends to be sort of we expect that to have bad and inflationary effects. Typically, Federal Reserve independence, central bank independence is associated with stable and lower inflation.
Wouldn't Okay, can you repeat that last part for me really quick? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so the independence of central banks, the authorities in charge of printing money, them being
Mhm.
politically independent, is typically associated with some type of, lower and more stable inflation.
Right, but inflation was the highest under Biden
So,
by historically over 40 years. It hasn't been that high since.
right. So there's two things there. For one, the claim that central bank independence is important and central bank independence is associated with lower inflation is not incompatible with the claim that Biden had the highest inflation in 40 years or whatever. I'm simply saying if you sort of look at the historical evidence, including you can look at evidence more recently, even from developing countries, it tends to be the case that when central banks are independent, when central bankers are able to operate as technocrats, operate as independent economists, they make decisions in the interest of the long-term economy, and that tends to lead to lower inflation and more contractionary policy than politicians who have more short-term interests and oftentimes may prefer easy monetary policy. With regards to the Biden inflation, I do think Biden had some effect on inflation. I think the American Rescue Plan, the stimulus plan, contributed some amount to inflation. But I also think a decent amount of inflation was supply shocks that the whole world experienced, right? And that the president or even Congress does not have much control over. And some of the money that was printed by the Federal Reserve, which Biden did not have direct control over. And the first two stimulus bills passed under Donald Trump as well. I would say at most, I think you could maybe contribute 30% of the later inflation in 2022 to the American Rescue Plan. But then you have to consider we also had a really strong labor market under Biden, right? Unemployment was really low. Growth was really high.
But why do you think that is? Okay, that's something that I actually addressed with people after the filming of what happened, because Isaiah Martin was even saying that unemployment was at an all-time low under Biden, but he also said in the same argument with somebody that if we were to mass deport all of the illegal immigrants, even the ones who are not committing any crimes, violent or otherwise, and are working and paying towards taxes towards our country, then we would lose people in the construction company, housing markets, and etc. So, do you think that the correlation between the unemployment rate under Biden had anything to do with his open border policy?
Well, I wouldn't characterize this policy as open borders, but I do think
You
that
could just walk right in and out. I did it.
is
I live on the
absolutely not true.
border.
So it was
I
easier.
lived on the southern border. We continuously came back and forth. I forgot my ID multiple times. I forgot my passport multiple times, and they said you're fine because you speak English. It was
Okay, so
embarrassing. It was
that's not. I would
embarrassing.
not. I would imagine if you're. I mean, you said you forgot your ID, but if you are a U.S. citizen and you have. You spend some short time in a foreign country, there might be some discretion that border officers have to let you in or whatever. But I thought the complaint was everyone coming over didn't assimilate and didn't even speak English, right? Most of the people who came over under Biden were not people let in because the border patrol bought their story or whatever. It was because they claimed asylum and they were screened for the credible fear standard or whatever, and were allowed to come in the country and wait for
They
their
were
asylum date
barely
here.
screened. They were asked questions that never had follow-ups and had voluntary visits afterwards. A
But that's
lot
still
of them
contrary.
who
That's
did
still
seek
contrary to your
asylum and did
to
have
your
visas didn't actually come back to the hearing that they are supposed to come back to renew a visa.
My understanding is over 90% of immigrants show up for their asylum court date. But
I'm sure that's
that you
totally
understand
true.
that still, I think that still is in conflict with your claim that there was a totally open border. Anyone could just come up and walk over, and if they spoke English, they could just waltz right in.
I
No,
didn't
these
say
people
that
they
anybody.
went
I'm
through the
saying that
asylum
that's what they
process
told me.
as
I
is
didn't
on
say
the.
that anybody. I'm saying that that's what they told to me. They told that to me after I multiple times forgot my ID and my passport, and they said it's fine. You don't need it.
So
Also, I know somebody as well who had family constantly flying back and forth from, um, where was it? Indonesia, I think. I think it was Indonesia. And he was able to do that by having somebody in the United States who is a citizen say that they are his family member and that they're coming for a visit for a certain amount of time. And
Yeah,
all they had to do was sign a
that's like,
piece of paper. There was no follow up. There was no check in. There was nothing. But after the Trump
hold on.
administration came in
First
office,
of
they
all,
were not
if you're
able to do
undergoing, if you're only going there for a temporary time, if you get like a tourist visa or whatever, obviously you're not going to have a follow up or check in or whatever. You're there under a temporary visa, right? You're not even trying to get citizenship or whatever.
That you shouldn't have any follow up for people you're allowing into your country, even under a temporary visa? The government isn't responsible for knowing who you are, where you are, and what you're doing in the country?
Not necessarily. There might be cases where I could think that, but like I don't think the U.S. government should be spending a ton of resources following up on every immigrant who comes here through the legal process on a temporary basis. That seems like a total waste of resources.
I think that should have more priority than the resources going to things like USAID, which people are super upset that got cut.
Sure, we can talk about that in a second, and I want to talk about that, of course. But I just want to say, I do think that the immigration does have an effect on the labor market, and immigration was a reason the labor market was so hot during Biden's term. I think companies being able to hire a lot more workers during that time was really good, and it helped native born workers as well, in my opinion.
No, it didn't. But my point there, actually.
Wait, just real quick. So my point about the labor market
as well, because citizens had to get double the amount of work in order to afford to live there because housing costs went up so much. Housing costs.
That's not how unemployment works. First of all, unemployment, if you have a full-time job, you're not counted as unemployed. So my point about the labor market, though, is fundamentally I do think the American Rescue Plan contributed some to inflation. But I do think there probably was a trade-off there with the really high growth and really tight labor market we saw under COVID. So you should weigh some of the added inflation we got against the 3% unemployment we had for 27 straight months, which is a really good labor market. We saw a lot of real wage growth for the bottom 10% of Americans. There was a lot of wage compression during that period. Some of it has persisted, where you saw wages grow fastest at the bottom 10% of workers as compared to the top 10% of workers. So I think you should weigh those things.
Significantly, the middle class got the raw end of the deal because it was raised for the lower class because of minimum wage growth, but then there was also raised at the top, but the middle didn't grow much at all.
So I don't believe that's true.
It didn't keep up. It didn't keep up in many states with the cost of living.
During what time period? So if you look at median household income, I think for 2 years, real median income was pretty stagnant. But we had a pandemic. Real median household income in almost every country, it was stagnant or whatever. The U.S. overall, I think, recovered from COVID very well, and I think Biden's plans helped America recover faster than they would have otherwise. It would seem odd to me to say that because we had maybe 3 percentage points more inflation in 2022 from the American Rescue Plan, we should therefore say Biden made all these people poorer and the economy sucked under him. Because I think you should weigh it against the other things. I would also, add that to my knowledge, when I say wage compression, it doesn't mean the wages for the middle class or the top 10% actually went down. It just means they didn't go up as much as the bottom 10% of people went up. So it's not necessarily the middle class got robbed. It's just that there was more equality because people earning the lowest wages saw the biggest increase.
How is that equality? Because it's an equal outcome, or because of what?
Because you're decreasing the gap between the amount that middle income earners get.
Artificially.
How's that?
Artificially bridging the gap between the lowest income and the middle class income. The middle class stayed stagnant and was already having a hard time in this economy, in the Biden economy. We're having a hard time in this economy as well. I'm not going to lie. I mean, of course, I'm not going to say we're not. But middle class wage growth didn't move with the economy. Lower class did. And they also get more assistance from the government. The upper class did, but they don't get assistance from the government. They get tax breaks. The middle class is the working class, the class that is supposed to be the ones who are benefiting the country the most, who are holding everybody up. They
So
got robbed. They got shit on.
I don't have every figure memorized, but the two numbers that I'm familiar with, off the top of my head, is like the real hourly wage growth for the bottom 10% of people, and like the median household income for everyone, right? So if you look at real median household income, I believe was roughly stagnant between 2022 and 2023. But again, I think that's largely because we had a pandemic, and it's not clear to
Well,
me
you
we
can't.
would have been
Well,
better off as a whole.
2023. A lot of countries were getting better around 2023, 2024, and even late 2022.
Well, we were getting better overall. Unemployment
Right.
during
So
that
I
time
mean,
was
you
really
can't
low.
blame the
Job growth
entire
was really
Biden
high.
economy. You can't really blame the entire Biden economy on the pandemic. That other countries were able to pull themselves out of much faster than we were, and we are one of the wealthiest countries in the world.
That's not true. Like if you compare U.S. GDP growth, real GDP growth to the G7 countries, we have the highest since COVID, right? And that's been pretty consistent. If you compare productivity, it's basically the same story. U.S. productivity growth has been pretty consistent and higher than Europe's as well post COVID.
Okay.
But I don't want to blame the like entire Biden economy on the pandemic or anything. As I've said, I do think that the real that inflation was a few percentage points higher, maybe 3 percentage points higher at its peak from the American Rescue Plan. I just think that there were trade-offs involved that were probably worth it with regards to the labor market and such.
Well, the labor market does the benefit, the economic GDP growth and the benefit of the entire country does not mean that the actual citizens are feeling that growth. We are just upholding the growth for the economic environment of the country. Because it even shows
Repeat that.
middle class didn't feel the growth.
Mm,
We didn't feel the growth. We didn't feel the stability that people want to claim the Biden administration brought to the economy. We were
I
struggling.
somewhat agree with that. So if you look at like the polling, like consumer sentiment and stuff, that did not do well under Biden, to be fair. It's still not doing well now, right? I think since COVID, we've kind of seen people care a lot more about inflation than they used to and care less about things like unemployment and GDP than they used to with regards to measures like consumer sentiment and such. But if you poll like Americans on their individual financials instead of simply asking them about the state of the whole economy, that has not fallen much. That has been doing relatively well. And, I think I care more about sort of the aggregate numbers, and I think we are better off because of many of the things that Biden did. I'm not going to defend all the things he did with the economy, but many of those did better well.
I know that we can pick apart each administration and their failures and what we agree is a failure or a benefit to the economy, for sure. I think that the Biden administration did more harm to the economy than good. And I think what the Trump administration is doing right now is there's going to be pain either way because we are in such a bad deficit and people are struggling really hard. They were struggling more when there was more people in the country that were contributing at a lower wage and competing with the housing market. But it's
Well,
going to
it's not like
happen
you've
either
seen,
way.
you haven't really seen like wage growth, like median wage growth, like the rate of it going up, like increase really. Like if you just look at like the Atlanta Fed wage tracker, for instance, I mean, that's still like roughly 4% wage growth. A month or whatever, which is like it's not any better than the last year under Biden. It's a little bit lower than the previous years under Biden because we had a really tight labor market during that time. I also I think most of the things Trump is doing are hurting. Obviously, I think the tariffs are quite bad and they have hurt our economy. And I think they also have contributed to the labor market that we're seeing now because of all the uncertainty and because of the taxes they place on intermediate goods. And with regard to the deficit, I don't know which deficit you're talking about, if you're talking about the trade deficit or budget deficit. But Trump clearly does not care about the budget deficit because he just passed a lot of tax cuts.
And the biggest tax cuts for the working class.
I
Yes, with
don't
some
believe so.
sprinkled
If you
in
look
for
at
the top class, sprinkled in for the bottom class, but it's the largest tax cuts for the middle class. was
not if you measure your
traumatizing.
total change in after tax income, right? So if you account for the fact that people are also losing like Medicaid benefits and SNAP benefits, and just look at the total change in after tax income for the bottom 20%
Because
of
there's
people,
actual
they see.
requirements for it now.
So there are
People are losing it
there
because
are
there's
adding
actual
work
financial
requirements. That is
requirements
correct,
for it
but the
now.
evidence we have historically suggests that most people who don't get the benefits after like work requirements are imposed. For example, we have evidence of this during COVID when we changed the eligibility requirements for Medicaid. 70% of the people who lost coverage after that were not people who didn't meet the new qualifications. They were just people who didn't file the paperwork or weren't notified of it or didn't keep up with the paperwork or whatever, right? There were just these administrative burdens that led to people losing their Medicaid. And, you can tell that like the CBO, right, is projecting like that the Medicaid budget savings from the fact that millions of people are going to not be on Medicaid anymore, right? So they're not going to save money without kicking a lot of fucking people off Medicaid. And, that seems very likely given the historical evidence we have.
Okay, so what you're saying is that because we are implementing requirements to qualify for Medicaid, that it's a bad thing that people are losing their Medicaid because they don't fit the requirements?
No, I'm saying most of the people who lose Medicaid will fit the requirements and simply don't keep up with the added administrative burden. I do also believe that there's
the added
roughly,
administration. Okay, so
I do believe there is a cut
it's your
to not Medicaid
responsibility
itself,
if
by the
you are
way.
an adult and you are taking money from the system that you were living in. If it says that if you have to go and sign a piece of paper every now and then, if you have to mail in a piece of paper every now and then, it is your responsibility to keep up with
But now you're
your
just
medical
we're just
insurance,
doing
whether
a
it's an additive or not.
we're just doing a goalpost shift from actually it's good to make sure that people on Medicaid are working to actually I don't care if people who aren't working who are working on Medicaid just lose it because they didn't keep up with the paperwork. I think many of the people who will lose it are in pretty sympathetic positions
keep
that
up with your
most people
paperwork.
would agree deserve some type of government assistance. And I do also believe, I could look it up, that there is a like $800 billion cut spread over the next 10 years to the committee managing Medicaid, and that's going to require like actual cuts to Medicaid as well. It's not just the work requirements that are being added.
Well, because it's also getting lowered. We're lowering the amount of people that are on Medicaid. I think it's going to be beneficial for the country, for the economy, because we are in a deficit to cut the fat, trim the fat. And if you are on Medicaid and you don't keep up with your paperwork because you're working, lazy, or otherwise, that is your fault and your responsibility.
So we've gone from it's only going to kick people off who aren't working to, well, if you don't file the paperwork, it's your fault, so I don't care, to actually it's good that we're kicking all these people off Medicaid.
I didn't say that. Yeah, when you are an adult in this country, you have full autonomy, which means you have full accountability for your actions or lack thereof. We need
Right.
to stop
So
infantilizing people who are using the system, who are on welfare, who are on food stamps, who are on Medicaid, whatever. They're not inferior to anybody intellectually or otherwise. They need to keep up with their responsibilities because you are an adult in this country.
So do you concede then that most people who lose coverage will probably be people who still meet the new qualifications? They just don't file the paperwork properly or whatever?
Do I concede that if they don't fill out their paperwork and keep up with their
That of the
responsibility,
people who are going to lose Medicaid over the
if
next,
they're going to lose Medicaid because they can't keep up with their paperwork and their responsibilities, then that's on them.
I'm just asking you, do you concede of the like roughly 7 to 8 million people who are going to be off of Medicaid over the next 10 years, if you think the majority of those people are going to be people who are in fact working?
That's estimated.
Of course it's estimated. It hasn't happened yet, but it's estimated based on historical evidence that we have.
Okay, so if we already know that there's more paperwork and administration things, hoops that you have to jump through in order to keep something that you need to have, prepare for it.
I'm just asking whether or not you think that like will in fact happen. Like maybe you think it's people's fault, like their own fault if they don't.
Happen? I think
I'm asking, of the estimated people, you think it could?
Yeah, I think it could, because I think people decide,
Like
oh,
what
I'm not going to fill this
probability?
in, or I'm not going to send it in on time, or what have you. Yeah, I think it could happen. But that,
I
again,
like
that would be
it could is very could mean there's a 10% chance it happens, could mean there's a 90% chance it
You want me
happens.
to
What
give
like
you like a professional estimate of what I'm not a professional.
I want you to
I
do
cannot
some. I
sit
want you
here
to
and
employ
say
some Bayesian reasoning skills here, okay? And give me a rough estimate of how likely it is that the majority of
basic
people.
reasoning skills would be, you're an adult, you have paperwork, your responsibility.
But that's not the
If you
question I'm
want this
asking.
outcome, you have to go through these steps. If you don't go through these steps, you don't get this outcome.
That's not the question I'm asking again. Maybe you think
Okay.
it's okay that they lose it because they
Yeah,
weren't
I do.
responsible enough. That's fine. But you can see that most of the people who will lose it are, in fact, people who meet the requirements. It's simply they don't keep up with the added administrative burden.
No, I don't think it would be most, but I think it would be some.
Okay, so all the historical evidence like disagrees with you on that one. If you look at again the COVID eligibility requirement changes under COVID, if you look at the stuff we have from Mississippi and Arkansas
Under the
when they added work
pandemic that
requirements to
hit all of a
Medicaid,
sudden.
it ultimately ends up kicking a lot of people off who are in sympathetic positions, probably deserve some government assistance, and it saves very little money. Does not actually increase employment for the state as a whole or anything. Also, I believe I was correct. There is just a like straight out $880 billion of cuts to Medicaid over the next 10 years. So that's, there's that as well. We are straight up just like cutting it.
I mean, it's important to trim the fat when you're in such debt.
Okay, so just two things with that. One, do you recognize that if you do, like, let's say someone is getting Medicaid, you can conceivably see how like that amount of Medicaid they're getting is like equivalent to some amount of cash, right?
In a way, it depends if they use it.
Sure. So do you understand how when we're calculating, what I'm saying is like after tax income, right? You get a certain amount of transfers from the government. People get Medicaid, they get SNAP. Sometimes they just get like refundable tax credits, like the child tax credit, like they just basically get cash, and they pay a certain amount of taxes to the government. Your after tax income is just the net of that. If you get $10,000 worth of Medicaid,
these people that are getting these benefits, I have been one of them in my life before. They're paying into the system, but they're actually draining from the system. So what they're giving in does not actually equal the amount that they are taking out.
yeah, a lot of poor people get more government assistance than they pay into the system. That's kind of what being poor is. So the principle I'm trying to get at though is if Trump offers these people tax cuts, if their income tax rate goes down, 2%, and if the standard deduction goes up from $12,000 to $14,000, maybe they save some money from those tax cuts. But if they're also losing their Medicaid benefits, they actually come out on the wrong side of that. They actually are worse off from that because they say,
well, in a way, you can be if you're somebody who has dialysis and you're on Medicaid and you need your Medicaid to pay for your dialysis and you only get $1,400 in a stimulus check and a 2% of your taxes, then yeah, you're probably going to lose out on something.
Sure. So the estimate I'm familiar with is, well, I've seen two. One is from Yale, the Yale Budget Lab, and the other is from the CBO. So the CBO estimates that the bottom, they separate it by decile. So the bottom 10% of people and the bottom 10 to 20% of people, they come out on the net negative from the big beautiful bill, in that they lose more money in benefits than they gain from the tax cuts. Do you think that's probably true?
Maybe I'd have to really look into that, but I believe you if you're saying that it comes from the CBO. Sure.
Yeah, there's another one I find, I don't remember the exact numbers, but similar things from the Yale Budget Lab. So, I think I don't even like. I'm a kind of wonky dude with some stuff. I don't even particularly like, for example, corporate income taxes. But the idea that these tax cuts are going to be help the middle class significantly, or that they're helping the middle class and lower classes more than the billionaires or whatever, I just think that is simply untrue. And I think it does show that Trump doesn't really care about the deficit.
I think it helps the middle class more. I think it doesn't necessarily help the whole of the lower class more. I think it just kind of keeps it stagnant where it is because they're a net drain from society with their lifestyle and their income input and output anyway. And if it helps the billionaires as well, that's equality of treatment, not because we're going to treat you differently depending on how much you make. If anything, the people who get more benefits are the lower class because of how much they make. The middle class will be getting the benefits from the big budget cuts or whatever, the big beautiful bill.
Didn't I just explain to you how you should be looking at the after tax income, which includes the benefit cuts that they're getting as well?
Right, but if the middle class aren't getting the benefits, Medicaid, if they aren't using Medicaid, they are gaining. Right.
So if you look at the CBO estimates, I think like the 30th to 40th percentile get like plus 0.5% after tax income. And it's like the next decile of people get like under 1% after tax income as well. These are not like meaningful increases, especially because I would, if you consider the fact that borrowing more, getting more debt is going to push up interest rates and probably push up mortgage rates for people as well, it probably comes out net negative or like very smallly positive for the middle class.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I would hope you...
We have I'll go till 8:30 tonight. Did you want to talk about USAID?
Yeah, we'll talk about USAID. So I guess you said on Jubilee, essentially, you don't think DOGE was like necessarily a complete failure because they shut down USAID, and USAID funded a lot of woke stuff or whatever.
Well, not that it just funded a lot of woke stuff. I didn't say that. I said, here's an example of something that we were funding we should not have been funding, like transgender plays and transgender balls.
Sure. So I think there are obviously going to be like examples of stuff that USAID was funding that it probably like should not have been, and especially if you're conservative and you oppose to whatever values.
Well, it should be ideologically neutral. We shouldn't be paying for ideologies we don't agree with in another country.
Well, we were paying for, so most of the stuff that for one, I think a lot of these things are exaggerated. Like a lot of times it'll actually end up being like, oh, USAID money was like funding, it was like giving a grant to like a woman's health hospital, and they were like also treating trans patients, and people like just conflate it with like funding transgender surgeries or whatever. But like, you know, I think the point of funding whatever woke stuff is because we're trying to promote some amount of liberalism and democracy, which is a general value that I would hope most conservatives still agree with in the third world or whatever. But, you know, nonetheless, I think that is that is like a very small amount of USAID spending. Most of it went to...
I don't think it's the majority at all. I don't think it's
Sure.
It's even 30% at all.
So
I don't agree
to
that. I think that it's part of it that we shouldn't be paying for. And if we were paying for something like that in another country, we could use that money in
But
home.
DOGE did not just go after the woke stuff, right? They essentially shut down the entire agency, and it is now officially entirely shut down and transferred to the State Department, and like 83% of its funding has just been entirely cut, and a lot of that went to, you know, really good programs funding. Repeat that, sorry.
80 to 90% of the programs were eliminated, and it was terminated thousands of contracts, and it estimates to save tens of billions of dollars.
So the budget for USAID was about like 0.3% of federal spending. That was what it was in 2024, like you can say tens of billions of dollars, but it's an incredibly but it's an incredibly small part of our budget, and the money does incredibly good things, right? If you look at USAID historically, it has saved like in the upwards of like 20 million lives, and you know, it saves roughly like a few million, 2 million-ish lives a year. And if you look at the estimates of people who are probably dead already from the USAID cuts, I mean, there are two estimates I have. One is 261,000 adults and 544,000 children. The other one is 500K to 1 million lives. So this is something that's already cost potentially a million lives.
That's a really important picture, because even if his numbers are off, I'm just going to grant it. That's a really important picture. Why are we paying 30% of all OECD, of all foreign aid combined in the UN and NATO? Why are we the ones paying so much compared to the other countries? They're not even paying what they're pledging, which is supposed to be 0.7. They're paying way under what we pay, and we paid under what we said we would pay, which is 0.7. We paid 0.24%.
I think you might be talking about a different type of foreign aid. You're saying we spend 30% of all foreign aid from the OECD?
We pay for 30% of all the OECD foreign aid in regards
but that's not like humanitarian aid. That's military
the money,
aid,
I guess,
right?
you could say, from the other countries. So if we pull in all the other countries, we're paying 30% of that.
You're almost certainly referring to military aid, or at least including military aid when you said that. So I do think the U.S.
foreign aid through USAID was paying for 30% of all the aid that all the other countries send out for foreign aid as well. Like all westernized countries, developed countries.
Oh, so that might... So I don't know for sure if that's true. That still sounds a little high to me. But that's because we are a really big country, right? Like we have a much higher GDP than most of these other countries. Oh, like we spend about 0.2% of our, or I think 0.8% of our GDP on foreign aid. A lot of other countries spend more than that. They spend closer to 1 to 2% of their GDP.
0.8 is 0.7.
My bad. 0.7% of GDP on foreign aid.
We said 0.08. So that's a big jump if we're actually going to, look at the numbers. But
so less than 1%, yeah.
Less than 1%. Yeah, irregardless of our GDP growth, the people of the country are not feeling the growth that the GDP is representing.
Well, I'm just using that to explain. Obviously, if you are a much richer country, you're going to donate.
Even if on your paper it looks good and the people of your country are suffering, then you need to cut in places that you are helping other countries. And you can say, you know what?
The reason I'm citing...
And all you private businesses, you guys can go ahead and do that. You guys have the money. If you want to be charitable to these other countries and these other ideological NGOs that are going on in other countries, you put your money towards that. We are going to save our money because we are in so much debt. We need to do something drastic, or our kids are not going to even see Social Security.
So the reason I'm citing the number, like as a percent of GDP, is I'm saying obviously just as a number in terms of billions of dollars or whatever, the US might contribute 30% of foreign aid or whatever, but that's because we're a very rich country. Just the same way you would expect, like, if a billionaire donates $1 million
in other areas. Just because we have that total amount of money doesn't mean we have that total amount of money to just spend however we want. It's already allocated.
Well, it was already congressionally allocated to USAID. I'm simply stating,
right, but
your obligation is going to differ based on how rich you are. Like,
and other countries are recognizing that we are in so much debt. Our dollar is losing so much value. Yes, a lot of it is Trump's doing, especially during this term, the value of the dollar going down. But what I'm saying is other countries are recognizing that our economy is failing the way that it is going now. So when you need to trim somewhere, you trim where you're just giving out money to other countries because you need
to. So the giving out money to other countries stuff
to do.
So that's obviously, I think the general position is it is good to save millions of lives at very low cost.
It is
USAID,
good. That's
which
subjective. That's subjective. It could be very low cost.
it can be
Sure.
it can be.
It is
I don't know.
subjective.
I don't know what you mean by it's subjective. I'm expressing to you
Well,
my
good is
opinion,
subjective.
and maybe you think
It's good to save millions of lives with money that you have in front of you, but it's also good to feed your family at home.
sure, but you should
Right?
like
So
you
two
can
things can be true
weigh
at
those
once.
things.
But
So
good
money,
is
so that's
subjective.
true, but money obviously goes a lot further in the third world to literally save
Well, not when
millions of
you're funneling
lives when it could not do the
NGOs. It
same
doesn't actually
when it could not do
develop
the
the
same in the US.
country. It just
I would just ask,
replaces the
wait,
government.
would you spend 0.7% of GDP to prevent the Holocaust, supposing it would not have any direct benefit to the US?
Without it having direct benefit to the US?
Yeah, like if we were
Then-
fighting World War II and like liberating all the
Well, the
camps.
only reason that the United States got involved in World War II is because of Pearl Harbor. We were staying out of it up until that point.
So I'm asking you if you think if suppose as a hypothetical,
Okay.
it cost 0.7% of GDP
Right.
to prevent all the big H. I
Well,
don't know what you can say on TikTok.
I think
And
that's,
suppose it didn't have any direct benefit to the U.S.'s war effort. Do you think it would have been a
I
good
think it's yeah.
thing to do?
Thank you. I was gonna say okay, so that doesn't even make any sense. If it were to stop the Holocaust, if we put 0.7% of our GDP that we were not even going to use anyway, and it didn't affect us, benefit or not. When
What do you mean? I'm not saying that spending the money is not going to affect us in any way.
Money, okay, so would you do it if you knew that a percentage of the money that you were sending over there was actually going to fund private businesses that the Nazis were running?
To prevent the big H? Yeah.
You would send over money to fund the Nazis.
If it saved 6 million lives.
Right, but it wouldn't. That's not what it's doing.
That's the point of the hypothetical it is saving 6 million lives.
Let's take a pause, okay? NGOs exist because there is underdeveloped countries.
I just want to answer to my hypothetical.
NGOs in these other countries, we're sending aid to NGOs into other countries, and it's not developing the countries, it's replacing the government in the countries.
Most of the money that like USAID sent to NGOs was just like grants given to like humanitarian organizations that just like ran hospitals and administered medicine.
Which is part of the 0.7%.
Yeah.
Right.
And if
the NGOs are not developing the country. They're actually creating.
So number one, I believe there is.
This has been talked about by, if I'm not mistaken, Goldman Sachs' previous CEO.
So I'm just saying, for one, I do believe there is evidence that like USAID and foreign money does in fact like lead to more economic growth in the places where it is spent, and it does because it saves lives, it lets people work longer and the such.
No, it actually doesn't create.
I'm just saying you can suppose
it creates short-term medial intervention. It doesn't create economic development in the country, in the host country. It creates paperwork economic development for the NGO economy, but not for the host economy.
So I don't believe that is true. I can look through my notes because I believe there is
look it up because it was even talked about. Here, I'll tell you right now.
Wait, but we can. I could concede that point. Now, I believe in my notes on USAID, I have a paper that it suggests that it does lead to more growth in the areas where the money is being spent for the host country. But regardless, my point, I want to answer to my hypothetical about suppose.
I'm not going to do this weird hypothetical that sending money over to other countries is going to prevent a Holocaust. I'm not going to do that because it's not accurate.
Well, no, I'm at first of all, you should be able to answer the hypothetical anyway. But second of all, I'm asking. Let's suppose we had to spend 0.7% of GDP to do air raids over Nazi Germany, and that would have stopped the the Holocaust. Do you think it would have been a good thing to do?
Doing this false equivalency thing, it doesn't make any sense.
I don't think it's a false equivalency, but I'm asking. I think your answer to that will prove. I think your answer to that will prove a principle.
If I had a magical wand and I had this money that it wouldn't affect me otherwise, would I send it over to stop a horrible regime? Yeah.
So I
Are
think what
other
that
countries
shows, the
also
principle that
kicking in?
shows is
But
that you do
0.7%
think
is not going to do anything.
that foreigners' lives have some moral value, that we have some
Oh, I think
obligation.
all human life has moral value.
Sure.
Absolutely.
So I
Yeah.
think, but you understand the principle you're accepting there. I think it's good to spend a small amount of money relative to your GDP to save lots of lives. And I don't see why that
Not
wouldn't
when it's
apply.
preventing the actual development of the host country to continue to self-sustain.
How does like PEPFAR prevent the host country from self-sustaining?
I don't know private NGO names in foreign countries, but I can
PEPFAR
explain
is
to
just the name
you.
of the program that administers HIV medication to mothers and
Okay.
infants so they don't catch HIV when they're giving birth.
Well, it's actually a very low chance that mothers even pass that on to their infants when they're pregnant, but okay. So,
Okay, still saves millions of lives.
okay, are other people also participating?
In what
Are
sense?
other countries that have the same type of development as we do, are they participating to the same level that we are? Because they're not, and they weren't,
That
which is why we
seems irrelevant.
stopped. It's irrelevant? I don't think so, because otherwise it's a waste of money.
Why is it a waste of money to spend a very
Because it's
small
not
amount of
going to
money to
actually
save
make a
millions of
difference in
lives?
the country. It's going to fund these NGOs for a tiny percentage of people who get access to these NGOs, and even them, they have criteria, and a lot of it is ideological, political criteria to qualify for these programs in other
So
countries.
I don't think.
So
First
they're
of all,
failing
I don't think it's only
long-term
good
governance.
to save lives if it
They're
causes.
creating a dependency, and it is not the sole priority that America has dependent countries like in Africa or the Middle East, because it's it's preventing long-term governance of the host country. It's not creating an economic development of the entire country. It's creating a small percentage of economic development within the NGO field.
So I don't. First of all, what's the evidence that it's not like it's creating these dependencies in the first place or whatever? I don't believe there's strong evidence for that.
You look at
But I
you
also
can
don't
look
think
at
it's only good to save lives if it leads to like some sustained economic growth in a country. I think it's good to save lives because people's lives are typically good and they typically have positive experiences, and we should try to promote that as much as possible.
Okay. Well, what you're trying to do is make a moral argument that we should be doing this way and this way only.
Correct.
I don't agree with that moral argument. I think that if people want to donate, and if people work to donate, then they can do that. But I don't
But
think it's the
why wouldn't you apply the
responsibility.
same logic to the Holocaust? Why wouldn't you say, well, people want to donate to the Air Force to do
It's
air raids and
totally
stop the
different.
Holocaust?
It's totally different. That's a war.
Okay.
We do that with war. We send foreign aid with war, not through USAID, but with other.
Why is it good to send foreign aid with war though? What is the reason it is good in my hypothetical to stop the Holocaust from happening?
You're like morally exhausting, I think.
Okay. I mean, I think the reason why it's good is because you're spending a relatively low amount of money to save a lot of lives from a lot of suffering.
That
I think
relatively
USAID
low
does.
amount of money, if you kept it for your country, you
In
would be
relation,
able to crawl out of debt slowly but surely.
number one, absolutely not.
Slowly
Again,
but
it's
surely. Yes, slowly but
0.3% of
surely.
our federal spending is not going to make a big impact on how much debt we have. And
Well,
number two,
Rescissions Act of
it does really good stuff.
2025 rescinded almost $8 billion. There was thousands of contracts that were eliminated through USAID, which is estimated to have saved tens of billions of dollars. We're
That's
also
like,
making money with tariffs. I know we don't really have time to talk about
true.
tariffs right now, but we are, as a country, making money with tariffs, which is going to, in the long run, benefit the economy of our country, even if it temporarily means that we are going to pay more for apples.
Well, I have a ton of disagreements with that,
I know
but
you do. And you
I
also
don't
think
think.
the moral high ground argument that we should be paying this because it's the morally right thing to do, which is how you get trapped into always paying for it, even though the money that you're sending over is going to NGOs. It's funding people like ISIS, it's funding people like Hamas.
True.
Hell, I mean, it
With
is.
funding
We're
ISIS,
sending
I don't think it
money
would be a good thing to do. Or, well, like if
right.
the
So
majority of
maybe
funding went
we
to
should
ISIS or
stop
whatever.
doing it, and we should be having private companies if they want to do it, which some programs that were eliminated were picked up by private companies.
Yeah, I know. And like
So I
I
mean,
think that I
they're
think
able
people
to
should
do
donate
it, then
more
do it. But
individually,
because
right? Like I donate 10% of my income to charity, to like just to
that's
clear here.
great.
But like, you know,
Well, people,
I also
if they
think
have the means to do that, they should do that. But you forcing this moral charitable act onto
well,
society is no
I think the
different than what
United
an
States should spend money on good things. I think
Islamic
when it's moral to
caliphate
spend money
does.
on something, you should do it.
Okay, you should do it. That doesn't mean you ought to or you are going to, period, the end.
I think you ought to spend money. I think the U.S. government ought to spend some amount of money on foreign aid.
You should do it. It's such a lame argument. Are you kidding
You
me?
ought do it. Do you care about the ought?
Regardless of how you morally think about it, you are forcing a society to pay for charity while they are
Every government
suffering at
program is like
home.
that. Do you think you
What?
can't argue for like any government like funding of anything? Like I don't know what you support the government doing exactly, but like you know the government is
support all
forcing
the
me to pay a
taxes that we
tariff
have,
regardless
that's
of
for
my
sure.
thoughts in
I
it,
don't
right? The
support
government
I don't
is
support a
forcing.
mileage tax. I don't support income tax. I don't support housing taxes, property taxes. I don't support clean energy bill taxes. I don't support any of that.
Okay,
No.
what do you support?
But I pay
Any
it. We
government spending?
legally
Is there
have to
any
pay our
welfare
taxes.
program? Is there like
Render
any
unto
welfare
Caesar what
program
is
you support?
Caesar's. What?
Is there like any welfare program you support?
Yeah, I think that it's important to pay for food
So how's
stamps for the
that not the
class.
same thing as like the USAID thing? You're forcing people, you're forcing me,
It's in our
regardless of my
country.
opinion,
It's
to
in our
pay for
home.
this
It's in
welfare.
our home. It's like if we had a neighborhood of people and I knew my neighbor was hungry and I had food, I'm going to help my neighbor. But if somebody in the other all the way across the country who I don't know says, "Hey, I'm hungry too. Can you also give me money?" And then everybody says, "Oh, me too. Me too. Over here. I'm hungry too. Oh, I was about to go get a job, but now I'm not going to. I was about to develop my own government, but now I'm not going to because you're paying for my life." That's how these systems work. And
So I don't think
also,
there's any evidence of the
forcing a
second half of that.
society
But
to pay for a charity that they may or may not agree with is the same thing that Islamic caliphates force people to do.
that's the same thing as food stamps. A lot of people don't agree with food stamps, but we force people to pay for it too because we think it's good. Because generally people have the intuition that it is good for the government to spend money to ensure some adequate food supply to people. In the same sense, I think generally it's good, and most American people do actually support foreign aid.
I know you think I'm demonic. I know you think I'm demonic because I think America first is important. That's
but you don't
totally
have to be.
fine. But I think it's important to take care of the family in your home before you say I'm going to feed other families and not prioritize the people in my house.
But you recognize that, for one, the aid that we give to other countries goes a lot further in terms of just like improving people's lives more than the same dollar in the U.S. Right? Like if I give, in the same sense, if I give $1,000 to a homeless person, that means a lot more than giving $1,000 to Jeff Bezos.
For sure.
If the U.S. money,
and then guess what happens when you give the money to a homeless person who has made decisions that ended up there? It doesn't go to them and their better future. It doesn't.
But there's a lot of evidence that USAID and the programs it funds save a lot of lives.
I'm sure it saves a lot of lives, but in the long run, it doesn't create government, it creates dependency.
What's the evidence for that?
Hindering a host country from developing themselves by interfering.
What's the evidence for that?
You can look it up. A lot of people talk about it, including people from the World Economic Forum, Goldman Sachs, and other banks. Go ahead and look it up.
I can look through. I mean, I could look through my note. Again, my understanding is that there are studies, for example, that say like when a hospital is, placed in a certain place in rural Africa, that city and that county and the surrounding area, they do experience stronger growth as a result of that. Because plausibly you could see how having people not have disease burden, not have a ton of diseases so they can work more and like live longer, like how that would probably lead to more stability and increased growth. You agree that mechanism is plausible?
plausible, sure. But can you also then concede to the idea that if you're sending money over to this rural area that has been in this state, that sure, we can use rural Africa, that the money is going to actually benefit the entirety of society and not just a small portion of it, where most of it is actually going to be laundered and used for violence?
So I don't think there's any evidence that the majority of it is laundered for violence or whatever. You know, I would hope
I
that
think the
DOGE, the
majority
agency that
is
was supposed to
laundered for
find all this,
violence.
would be the one that came out with all the evidence for that, but they didn't do that. They just cut basically the entire department.
Good, because the entire department was funding things that shouldn't be funded in the first place. We are
Where's the evidence for
spending.
that?
We are. I just told you how NGOs work in foreign countries.
What's the evidence that the majority of money was going to NGOs for some improper purpose?
I didn't say that the majority of money was going to NGOs for an improper purpose. I said that money going to NGOs are not actually giving a net benefit for the host country, but only giving a minor benefit for the NGO economy, not for the host country. You want to hinder the development of an underdeveloped country by sending your aid in, which oftentimes is ran by people who are related to the people who are sending the money, and they get to decide where it goes, what it's used for, the ideological purposes of it, or not. It also funds things, again, like I said, terror groups in Syria, Iraq, Gaza, Africa. So, I mean, you're sending money to fund these groups, but then you're also saying, but it also helps this small portion. Sure, it can help
No, I
that
think,
small
first of
portion,
all,
but it
I
doesn't
don't.
help the actual situation.
Number one, I don't think there's any solid evidence to suggest that a significant portion of the money went to
Did I
terror
say
organizations
significant
or
portion funds terror organizations? You are a liberal, aren't you?
you didn't say
like
you
to
did,
just pick up
to be fair, you
words.
didn't say a majority. You didn't say a majority of the money funds terror organizations. I recognize that. You are implying,
Okay.
I think, much more of it went to terror organizations than there was any reasonable basis for believing. Again, I would hope that DOGE,
Much
the
more. I'm sorry
agency that was
that's how
supposed to
you're
find all
taking
this
it,
stuff,
but if you
would have actually found
listen
anything. But
to
like,
my
where's
words,
DOGE's
I'm
where's
sorry
DOGE's
that's how you're
reports?
taking it, but if you actually listen to what I'm saying and look it up yourself, look up. You can ask
Why
chat,
didn't DOGE
Grok,
find
whatever you
anything?
want to do.
Why
Huh?
didn't DOGE, the agency that was supposed to find all this stuff, find any evidence of it going to like a fucking ton of terrorist organizations or whatever?
They found a ton of fraudulent evidence. They were focusing
Where?
a majority on the fraud that was happening inside the country, but they were also getting sued left and right, and they were having
Tell
terror
me why.
attacks on the person who was running the entire operation in the first place.
Oh, big
So that
balls?
was
Yeah.
kind of,
Dang.
yeah.
So unfortunate
There were
for
terror
big
attacks
balls.
within the country.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm asking for evidence that DOGE found with regards to the agency that they cut spending for, which I think did very good things, even if they had
Again,
just
that's
an
subjective.
uncertain amount of evidence, right? I don't think you should cut essentially the entire program or the entire department that is saving, again, millions of lives without having some reasonable degree of certainty that most of the money is being used for improper purposes or whatever. And hopefully we'd only cut the money that's actually going to improper purposes.
I didn't say most of the money is going to improper purposes.
How much is okay?
Repeating it. You keep repeating it, and somehow it's gonna make it true, and that's something that came out of my mouth.
Number
but that never came out of my mouth.
Number one,
That's not something
you
I
said that
believe.
all number one at one
think
point.
it's a major portion, but it is a portion. And if we are giving a portion to terror groups that are killing a small portion of people, or benefiting a small portion of people, it kind of
It benefited millions of
out,
people. But
doesn't it?
number one, you did say that you thought all of the money was stuff that
Now
money
it's
shouldn't
all
be
the
spent
money.
on.
It was most of the money. Now it's all the money.
You literally said at one point, all the money is going to stuff that shouldn't be spent on anyways. You said that at one point. Number two, I think any
Did not
reasonable
say all the
person.
money.
Okay,
Huh?
I think reasonable person, you definitely did, but I think any reasonable person, when you say stuff like all the like this USAID money went to a bunch of NGOs and it doesn't actually help the host country and it does all this evil horrible stuff or whatever, the implication that they get, the implication
Oh
that
my gosh,
the
you are
implication.
trying to make this. Okay, I'm very happy for you and your moral superiority thing that you have
True.
going on. But no, I don't think that NGOs are inherently evil or doing just evil, horrible things. But I do think that it is hindering the host country from developing its own country, and
I
its
don't.
own
You've
government.
clearly painted NGOs in a very negative light. I'm not
I
suggesting that
don't
you
think
think every.
NGOs and foreign. I don't think I've clearly painted this picture, and you're going to interpret it like the liberal arts student that you are. That's
I
totally
don't think you've said
fine.
a single positive NGOs about this thing the whole time. You've only used
I don't
NGOs as like a
fucking
negative
have
thing.
to.
That
I
doesn't
don't
that doesn't
have
mean that I'm not
to.
suggesting that you think
I
all
don't
NGOs are
have
bad
to
or anything.
say.
But again, I think
don't have
any
to.
person watching you speak, listen to you speak, would not think, oh, this girl thinks that 1% of money goes to NGOs. They would think, oh, this girl thinks, or this girl's saying that a significant portion, that 30% plus of the money goes to NGOs for improper purposes. Also, I will not be gaslit. You 100% said all the money is going to something that's going to be spent on anyways.
Well, clearly 90%, almost 90%, 83 to 85% of the programs were eliminated because it was money that shouldn't be spent outside of the country.
No, but should it be spent by? It was cut because DOGE was like ideologically opposed to it, not because DOGE is some. Again, it's funny that you think all this money's being spent in these weird ways. DOGE didn't come out with any evidence of that. They just cut 83% of the programs without solid evidence of any of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm very happy for your moral superiority. I don't agree.
I'm not like claiming to be like morally superior
But you're
or
trying to
anything. I like.
paint. But let's just be honest. What you're doing is you're trying to paint me in this picture that I think that you're putting me in absolute statements, and I didn't make absolute statements. I don't think that NGOs are all inherently evil, but I don't
never
think that
said
they're
that.
a net bet. Are you done?
Yep, I'm done.
Okay, I don't think that they're a net benefit to the country that they're going in and helping. They might be helping their NGO economy, but they're not helping the actual economy of the country and the government that they're going in to help. And you
Okay.
can look at people who have said things, the same thing that what I'm saying, like it's right here. Oh my gosh.
There was some very rigorous evidence.
Okay, what's his name? William Easterly from the World Bank, Dambisa Mayo from the Goldman Sachs and World Bank, and Angus Deaton from Noble.
To be clear, are these people saying that humanitarian aid that of the type USAID was doing did not cause long-run economic growth, or are they saying that NGOs were embezzling the money, or what are these people claiming exactly?
Argues that aid correlates with slower growth and higher corruption, especially when delivered long-term via NGOs. Yeah.
Okay, so number one, I don't know exactly what we're citing there, but there's obviously going to be a correlation between how rich a country is and how fast it grows to how much foreign aid it gets. What would matter would be the causal mechanism, whether the counterfactual is higher or lower, because we would expect the poor countries are the ones that are going to be getting the most aid. The question is whether or not the aid that they're getting is raising or lowering their growth.
Okay.
And like I can read you. I found the paper that I have in my notes, the meta-analysis that I just have saved in my notes. That said, they actually try to assess the causality of it. They disaggregate samples into different time horizons and assess if there are temporal shifts in aid effectiveness. The new and updated results show that earlier reported positive evidence that AID's impact is robust to the inclusion of more recent studies, and this holds for different time horizons as well. Like,
okay.
Well, okay.
I really appreciate the debate. I don't think we agree at all on the way foreign aid is distributed or how it should be used, but I appreciate the practice for debating economy topics, especially foreign economy topics, but thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate talking. I'm sure we can
have a great
night. Something up again one time. If you ever want to talk about tariffs or anything, we can talk about that too.
We can talk about that maybe another time.
All right. Well,
okay. Good night.
Good night. I appreciate it. Yep.
Yeah.
My God. I hate TikTok. Thank you for watching, and if you want to help me continue to make content, liking, subscribing, and commenting are all greatly appreciated. You can also make sure to check out my Twitch, my Kick, and my Twitter down below, or consider becoming a member to my YouTube channel, which really helps support me as well.